Hello, today is Thursday, the 4th of April, 2019, and the weather forecast in Lagos is 28 degrees. It's still very hot, humid, and sometimes the air is quite still. Some people have suggested therapies like cold water bath and dousing oneself with methylated powder. But people, please remember to stay hydrated always, any which way. With me in this studio this morning to discuss major news headlines in our dailies is Dr. Kubi Udofia, a legal practitioner, and I'm David Alabi. This is Off the Press. Good morning, Dr. Udofia.
Good morning, David.
Now we have the temperatures rising high, and some would say, well, I just wish I could soak myself in a cold bath. How do you feel this morning?
Yeah, I feel good. I mean, I'm used to the weather. It's a bit humid, but I mean, not so bad. Yeah.
Okay, now it's time to go into the papers of the day. We have the Punch newspaper, we have the Nation, we have Vanguard newspaper, and much more. And it's time to go into the headlines now, shall we? We start off with the Nation newspaper, and the biggest headline: NJC advises President Buhari to retire Onogan over $1.7 million cash. Judicial Council seeks full benefits for suspended CJN, and INEC declares Wike Rivers governor-elect. And the FEC approves 5.5 billion naira to create 60,000 jobs, and we have details of that at page 8. Olubadan, not sincere with directive. Page 42 has the details there, and Abdulrazak names 80-man panel. Quadri is 23 in ITTF ranking. That's talking sports in page 47, and Dangote, how North can tackle poverty. We have details of that in page 43. And looking at the pictorial here, we are seeing one of the victims of the kidnappings on the Kaduna-Abuja road being rescued when Kaduna State Governor Nasir El-Rufai's security team arrived at the scene just yesterday. An IMF economy on the right track is talking about Nigeria's economy, and Malabu Oil Block Award illegal. Okay, and taking a flip to the back pages, we see the editorial notebook written by Benga Omotosho, and just before Buhari's tough decisions. And we also see another article here, the UAE robbery suspect. And according to Dabiri-erewa, she says, well, crime wears no ethnic badge. It is a universal phenomenon that should be condemned by all, always. And the revolution consuming our own children. Now, quickly, Dr. Udofia, let's start with the biggest story of today. That's the NJC now recommending that, well, the Chief Justice of Nigeria, who's been suspended, should retire. Now, once again, we are saying, are we addressing this situation full on? Are we following due process? If there are certain areas of infractions, why aren't we seeing this going much more further? Instead, the NJC is now saying, well, as part of their suggestion or recommendation, there is need for a compulsory retirement, and he must get his full benefit. What do you make of this headline?
I think, to start with, I think we have to be very careful about this headline, because I read the press statement from NJC yesterday, and they didn't disclose the content of their recommendation to the president. So what the NJC actually said was, look, because of the importance of what we're dealing with, the sensitive nature, we're dealing with the #1 judicial officer in Nigeria, we're not going to make public our recommendation that it's proper or appropriate to channel it first to the president before making it public. So I'm surprised at the headline. I'm not sure as to how...
Well, the Nation newspaper is saying that this is according to a source that would rather decide not to be named, anonymous.
Exactly. So I think that this is still within the realm of speculation. But what the NJC has done is they made recommendations based on testimonies that were presented before them, but significantly, they decided to abstain from the issues that are before the Code of Conduct Tribunal that has to do with false or non-declaration of assets, because they believe that that's sub judice. It's before a court of law, and so they have no right to comment on that.
But do you think this would be a sharp twist of fate if we see that this is the conclusion of this matter?
I don't think we're out of the woods yet. I don't think this would settle the matter, because recommendations have been made. And I think it's best to wait to see what recommendations have been made. But the case at the CCT is still ongoing, and whatever happens there, if he is found culpable, then the NJC would have to come back and deliberate on that.
Okay, now moving on to the Punch newspaper, reactions as Dangote asks northern governors to combat extreme poverty. We have details of that on page 10, and the 19 northern states which account for over 54% of the country's population and 70% of its landmass collectively generated only 21% of the total sub-national internally generated revenue in 2017, and that's according to Dangote, who is proffering solutions to the problems within the north, talking about extreme poverty there. And we are seeing a graph here which shows the margin of win between the PDP governorship candidate, who is now the governor-elect of Rivers State, Wike, beating the candidate of the AAC, that's Biokpomabo Awara. And we also have a table here showing the margin of win across the different local government areas in Rivers State. Wike wins Rivers governorship poll, and details of that in page 2 of the Punch newspaper. Why president hasn't signed 30,000 naira minimum wage bill. We have the presidency there revealing details of that in page 9 as well. Police arrest prison officers for plotting inmates' escape. Page 4 and 5. Details also there. And Kolade's killers will not go unpunished. That's a warning and a charge from President Muhammadu Buhari. IMF urges the federal government to remove tax incentives, reform VAT. PDP Saraki Dogara's plot to hijack the 9th National Assembly will fail. And that's also according to the APC. Details of that in page 2. Ibadan Oba's fault Olubadan on illegal crowns, and NJC probes report on Onoge acting CJN to President Buhari. Verdict voiding my candidature won't stand, and that's according to Adeleke amidst the whole lot of reports there saying that he doesn't have a certificate, right? And no functional toilet in Nigerian embassy in Russia. That's the Senate panel there, and details of that on page 7. But let's look at reactions from Dangote, saying that, well, the northern governors have to look at the situation of poverty holistically. You can't have such landmass, arable land, good soils for agriculture. Talk about whatever crops that will thrive there and use that as your area of comparative advantages. But the governors there are not necessarily doing anything, and we see people in the north. The image of the north we always have is just poverty. We just see desert land. We have people hungry. What do you make of this stance where he says this time around the northern governors have to push the agenda of agriculture, make it the mainstay, and you see things turn around?
I think Alhaji Aliko Dangote is stating the obvious. I mean, it's something that we all know, like he highlighted certain features in the north. For instance, I mean, in terms of population, it's estimated they are about 54% of the population in Nigeria. In terms of land mass, 70% of Nigerian land mass is in the north. But when you look at the figures, 2017, in terms of contribution to internally generated revenue in Nigeria, they contributed only 21%. So here he tried to challenge the northern governors. Look, the government cannot do it alone. We all know that. But you have to create that enabling environment for private investors to come in. You have to, set the fundamentals right. You have the land, agricultural land, but yet you have so many almajiris, young people going out, about roaming around the streets, doing nothing. So set the infrastructure right, set the environment, enable environment, which would encourage investors to come in and invest. And I think Kaduna State, they're doing that. Kano State, he mentioned 2 states, which he believed that if at least 10 northern governors are following that lead, there will be a change in the north. So, I mean, he's stating the obvious, but it's good that, I mean, he's highlighting this because, I mean, it's in the news. If someone else said it, it wouldn't make the headlines.
But I believe that the governors as well understand the climes where they operate. You are the executive director of that state. You should know how to run those areas properly and ensure that we reap the benefits, because you can't just have such land mass, such potential, and we just leave it to waste. But some would say it's just the Nigerian factor. Yeah,
it's a Nigerian factor, living on handouts, living for, looking forward to the federal government every month to send in
States should now be
allocations
responsible.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, moving on to this day newspaper, IMF, Nigeria's economy recovering, supports tax reforms and says persistent structural challenges restrain economic growth. And we also move on to another headline here. NJC sends report on Onoge Muhammad to Buhari, CJN closes defense at CCT. Details of that in page 6. And Ndume's ambition not an issue, says the APC. That's also in page 6 of this day newspaper. Jubilation as INEC declares Wike winner of the Rivers State governorship poll. And trounces APC's surrogate candidate Biok Bamabo, and the PDP, Atiku Obi, says it's victory for democracy. 778 billion naira debt to NBET weighs down power sector discourse. Now, Buhari wants security operatives against brutalizing Nigerians. Once again, we look at reports from the International Monetary Fund, and it's saying here, well, remove fuel subsidy, have some adjustment with your tax reforms, and then you'll see Nigeria grow at a steady pace. We've seen the projections for 2019. They've also helped in budget implementation and a whole lot more. But to what extent do you think the Nigerian government should take cues from the IMF, follow their lead, and possibly we would see a rejig of the Nigerian economy?
Okay, to start with, looking at the report, I mean, they've given Nigeria, well, a partial pass mark because they looked at the fundamentals last year. 2018, we had real GDP growth of 11.9%, which is about 0.8% increase from that of 2017. And inflation rate also reduced by, I think...
fell to 11.4%.
11.4%, and which is something good. But though it's still below the CBN target of 6 to 9%. And that's where they are now making recommendations as to what to do in order to meet the target set by CBN and, you know, get out completely from the woods, because we still have structural and policy challenges. In terms of infrastructure gap, we have issues of infrastructure. I mean, if infrastructure is not there, you don't have an enabling environment for investors to invest. You have, you still have exchange rate challenges, not having a unified exchange rate and all that. So I think it's a pass mark for the government, a pat on the back, you're doing well, but yet again, you have a long way to go. You have structural and policy challenges which you have to work on. The reforms are going on, but the pace is quite slow. You need to hasten up with that.
And talking about recovery, the average man on the streets might tell you, well, I don't see any recovery in my pocket, and they would definitely expect that government takes